How bad are things actually in Canada? A few years ago, we worked with one of the largest telco companies here. Telcos, if you understand cyberspace, are like the queens of battle. They're the carriers. That's where the virtual and the physical aspects of cyberspace come together. Your telco carrier knows more about what goes on in Canadian cyberspace than the government and most industries do independently. So looking down from that level, you get a unique perspective of the traffic. So what did we find when we looked at the sort of telco level overall in Canada? Well, one of the things we found was that about an eighth of all internet traffic contains either payload or some kind of malignant code. We found 80,000 zero-day exploits per day being detected on Canadian networks. And statistically, that means that between 5 and 12 of all computing devices connected to Canadian networks is owned by some form of botnet or malignant code at any given time. So look around you, and 5 to 12% of you in this room are probably owned. That's the what. The question you have to ask yourself is the why. Why do we have this? Why is it happening? And why does espionage actually play a role in this? And here I think we have to take a little bit of a perspective on it. Cyberspace really has come into existence as a global interconnected set of networks over the last 20 years. In historical terms, that is a blink of an eye. It has expanded because it has created essentially a friction-free way for institutions to be able to communicate. And the ability to communicate, whether that's for business, whether that's for government, whether that's for other tasks, really is something that has made globalization work. Governments and corporations have jumped into it because it's allowed them to achieve efficiencies that they otherwise couldn't have. For governments, it's meant they were able to downsize certain public functions. For corporations, it means that they've been able to reduce the kinds of costs that previously existed from carrying large inventories or having centralized production. There's good reasons why cyberspace has emerged the way that it has. But the incentive has been on creating faster, better, more connectivity, not on security. In fact, if you want to look at it from an industrial safety point of view and compare automobiles to cyberspace, it's as if we were building automobiles with ejection seats rather than seat belts. Okay? Effectively, the incentive to create devices that had less security so they can communicate faster was what's happening. Moreover, that's also being reflected in the way that we the legal liability that we've built into the way that these devices and this kind of software is done. So everybody here, do you actually think you own the software in your computer? Guess what? You don't. Read the fine print. You're leasing it. Which means that the same kind of consumer protections that would be mandatory if you bought a car simply don't apply. Okay? Security not only is not built into the code, but it's actually not built into the legal basis upon which we use these kinds of systems. Now, the other aspect to recognize is the fact that cyberspace now encompasses approximately 2/3 of all humanity. Of those people connected to cyberspace, that's whether by cell phone or by high-speed internet, 2/3 are under the age of 35. 50% are under the age of 25. What does that reflect? That reflects a youthful demographic that's just entering into its most productive years of life. This is where the ambitions of childhood meet the very realities of adulthood. This is the demographic that has the most to gain and the most to lose by not changing the circumstances in which they live, whether those are political, economic, or social. The fact that this demographic is connected to the internet, connected to cyberspace, the digital natives that have grown up with it, means that they use this as a way of routing around authority and solving the problems they have. Want to explain to yourself the Arab Awakening? Take a look at the demographics, the uptake of technology, and there's a very strong correlation. The same also holds true, though, for cybercrime. Why? 3 out of 5 new internet users are coming from where? Fragile and failed states. Okay? The center of gravity of cyberspace is moving from North America to the South and East, and it's not just going to the Chinas and to the Indians. It's going to countries where the structural barriers on advancement of individual interests are the strongest. If you want to understand the problem of global cybercrime, which is, to a certain extent, the primordial soup of cyber espionage, you've got to recognize that it's a lot easier to build your bank account online than it is to fight over a fistful of rubles in the back alleyways of Yekaterinburg. It's the motivation plus the infrastructure, which is globally contiguous, that creates the ability for cybercrime to exist. And why I say cybercrime and how I look at cyber espionage is very easy. There is nothing that we have seen on the cyber espionage side that we have not seen on the cyber crime side. In fact, if you look at something like Stuxnet, it is a Frankenstein amalgam of the best practice of cybercrime times X. States use this because they can hide espionage activities within the envelope of what already is occurring, which is mass insecurity online. The difference between cybercrime and cyber espionage is the intent. It's the domain experience required in order to go after specific information. We saw this in the GhostNet investigation. Ultimately, and GhostNet was an investigation where we found a Chinese piece of malware that ultimately affected 125 foreign ministries around the world. Was exploiting information, everything from the Israeli consulate in Beijing through to the Russian foreign ministry, the Indian foreign ministry, and others. In fact, one of the things that we managed to find in a corollary investigation was copies of Canadian visa applications put to the Indian embassy in Kabul. Why was that significant? Because any civilian working for ISAF in Kabul would have had to apply for an Indian transit visa. So this is a beautiful way of being able to enumerate every single Canadian that was working in Afghanistan at that particular point in time. Now, moving from cyber espionage to cyber warfare, there is one very important consideration that most people haven't looked at in cyber warfare, and that's that any time that you actually use a piece of code in order to create near kinetic effects, you're actually giving away your weapon. By using code to attack a target, you're actually giving the recipient of your attack the blueprint for being able to use that same code over again. And that's why, to some extent, there's a natural check and balance in cyber warfare. That it's something that you have to be very, very careful when you're going to use, because you can only use it once. Thank you.
Very good. Now, Brian talked about Canada, but Richard or Rafael, have other companies been affected in Canada by China's cyber spying, besides Nortel? Do you have any other examples?
So I don't want to appear like the people in the movie that when they tried to answer this question, everyone laughed. But let me put it this way. If there is a company that is either being acquired or conducting a joint venture with a Chinese organization, I guarantee you that they already are compromised by the Chinese, or they will be very quickly. So take a look at what's going on in the newspaper or what's happened recently, and any of those activities, I guarantee the Chinese have compromised. It's part of their due diligence process, honestly. And you think about it from their perspective, they don't have a lot of confidence in financial numbers, because from their experience, it's all fabricated. You can't really rely on it. So what they do is they break into their future partner, steal the financials directly, and have them during the negotiations in front of them. So I can't name names, and in some cases Mandiant has helped some of these companies up here, but as part of the agreements we sign, we can't notify, or we can't tell the public who those organizations are. It's only happened a few times in our company's history where the victim that we've helped has come forward and said, yes, tell the world. The two most recent were the New York Times and then the state of South Carolina. Both of those wanted the world to know that they'd been hacked by the Chinese. Or actually, the state of South Carolina wasn't the Chinese, it was an organized crime group. But it's very rare for anyone who hires someone like us to want to come out and tell the world. But yes, there are definitely other targets in Canada.
Brian?
I want to add a little bit to the comment. At the time in 2008, Nortel was struggling, and we were offered up to sell one of our business units. And one of the potential bidders on this was Huawei. And yes, so I was concerned, and that was the time I was doing the memory dumps. And I thought to myself, what better target than our CEO, that they could be monitoring him? This is a perfect time, because it's like, where can I prove that they're in our network? So I went to my management to try to get the approval to do a memory dump of his computer, because I was convinced I'd find some stuff on there. And I fought my own management. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, I didn't get the approval. The security director said, what proof do you have? I don't want to bother the CEO of the company. I said, my memory dump will take 10 minutes, and he won't even know that it's happening. But they wanted me to prove, and so I actually thought to myself, I'm going to go look. I actually went and looked at the web logs, and saw that he was doing some web stuff on Yahoo and so on and so on. And in the middle of a session, he had a blurb go over to China. So I went back the next week and said, hey, look, I don't have the absolute proof, but this doesn't fit in with what he was browsing. Something happened here, and maybe this is a beacon, I don't know. It's just sharing, that they're tracking. I still didn't get the approval to go and do a memory dump at his computer. To me, that was very strong evidence that I should go and look at his computer. He's a perfect target. We're trying to sell a business unit, and China has every reason to know who's offering the lowest, the highest amount, for that business unit. So they can make sure they outbid them, but not by any more than they need to. I'm sorry.
Well, I think the statistics that I quoted in my opening remarks probably should be no doubt that Canadian industrial actors are certainly a high priority target for espionage, including that from China. It's a well-known matter of public record that several government departments, including the Treasury Board, CRA, and others, were hit. The RDC was almost entirely owned by the Chinese for quite a long time. So these are fairly well-established target sets that I think we've seen for quite a while. But there's, I think, another dimension to this which is worthwhile looking at, and that's the fact that the emergence of the internet has really completely revolutionized the art and science of signals intelligence. Signals intelligence, it's been described by some as it's really being the last secret worth keeping. In fact, there's no reason, no surprise that the Five Eyes Alliance has probably been the strongest alliance to emerge out of the Second World War and continue up to date, despite the fact that there's no actual agreement saying that the Five Eyes exist, because intelligence sharing and what was derived from the signals intelligence works. What the internet changed, what the emergence of cyberspace changed is this. Previously, signals intelligence was all about building the capability for being able to listen in to a specific pair of communications. In other words, it was all about being able to capture information in motion or data in motion as it transited. With every device now, or with devices now, such as your corporate CEO's laptop or data centers being connected to the network, it's possible to be able to attack information at rest. That's what's changed. The ability to actually hoover up everything and to do so using essentially throwaway code that's developed extremely cheaply rather than billion-dollar devices to be able to do that. Chinese are students of history. They realize that knowledge is power. They looked at the experience of, for example, how the United States became an industrial power. How did you do that? By disregarding copyright and patent law in the UK, or the Great Britain, and